Here we are on the 33rd Sunday of Ordinary Time. Keep in mind, next week's going to be Christ the King, and then we're going to restart the liturgical year with Advent. So we're kind of wrapping things up. We're in the end of Mark chapter 13, and it's a very interesting and somewhat confusing passage, but we are reading verses 24 through 32. The entire chapter is really the apostles asking him, like, wait, what is this you're saying about the temple not being here? And also tell us about the end times. So there's kind of like two questions that Jesus is answering. One, he's giving them a prediction that the temple will be gone, which he ends up being right about, because 40 years later, within a generation, the temple falls after all these wars. And two, he's speaking about the second coming. I think first of all, it's a little bit confusing because we hear things like the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light and the stars will be falling from the sky and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. But all of those things are actually very similar to a sign of a city being destroyed in the Old Testament. That's the language of Jeremiah, of Isaiah. And so those parts, although we might be tempted to think it's speaking about the end times, are actually speaking more about the temple. And he's speaking about how there will be a lot of war, and there is, with the Romans before the temple falls in 70 AD. The end of this, though, I think is the most important for our personal lives, which is, but of that day or hour no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Which we can get confused and say, like, Jesus, do you not know the day? And the church has actually clarified this by saying Jesus does not know the day, like, from his humanity. Yes, he does know it as God, but in the way that Jesus participates on earth, we see very oftentimes, like, he's not just this know-it-all all the time. He speaks differently in this unity of his humanity and his divinity. So our takeaway, though, needs to be, like, not to try to guess, like, when Jesus is coming back. I think sometimes there can be, like, different, like, devotions and stuff that are, like, really worried, or sometimes different, like, Christian break off religions, like, this is the day, like, all the stars align and all that stuff. Like, the reality is we need to worry a lot less about when the quote unquote test is and more about knowing the material on the test, which I can tell you the question right now. It's going to be, do you know me? Do you know Jesus? You know, we have a fear sometimes that Jesus will say, I do not know you at our final judgment, as he says. But I think the real fear is that we will see him and not know him because we have not spent time in prayer with him. We have not found him in the sanctuary of our hearts. So as we look ahead as a church towards the end times, let's look at the present times and realize that Jesus needs to be our friend today, tomorrow, and forever. Happy 33rd Sunday of Ordinary Time. See you next week.